In this short video, I want to demonstrate how to use the Boolean operation with primitive objects and to leverage the symmetry of certain objects so that we can take a modular approach to modeling. The object that we're going to model is a fluted column. And you notice that there are 10 flutes going around the perimeter of this object. Further, notice that all of the polygons in this model are quads. To begin our model, I'm going to create a polygon cylinder. In the options, the radius and the height don't really matter except for your own personal choice. The axis divisions is going to be the actual number of flutes that you want to have on your column. So if I leave this at the default of 20, I'm going to build the flute in a section of 2. So we'll have 10 flutes in this column. The height and cap divisions, I'm going to set the height division to 2. And I'll show you why in a minute. The cap divisions, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to delete the caps anyway. So let's go ahead and create this. So here's my cylinder, and I'm just going to scale this down to make it a little bit shorter and squatter, but I'm going to leave it at the origin, and that's very, very important. You want to leave this right at the 0, 0, 0. To delete the caps, I'll select all of the faces, and then control and select all of the vertical faces, and that will leave the top and the bottom only. And then I'll just hit the delete key. In the front view, I'm going to want to select the 4 faces that are lined up with the z-axis in my front view orientation. I'll hold the shift key down and select all of the faces, and that will effectively invert my selection, and I'll hit delete. So now I have just those 4 sections that I'll modify and then duplicate. The next part of this model is going to be a polygon sphere. So in my polygon primitives, I'll open up the sphere option box, and there are 2 things that I want to make sure of. One is that the axis divisions is set to 8, and the other is that the north pole axis, the north-south pole axis, aligns with the Z here. So let's create that. You can see that the axis of symmetry of the sphere is perpendicular to the cylinder section. The next thing that I want to do is intersect these 2, and I want to make sure that the pivot point of the sphere aligns with the intersection of these 2 lines on the cylinder section. So in order to do that, I'll select the z-axis manipulator of the sphere. I'll hold down the C key and then middle mouse click on one of these edges, one of these center edges. And that will snap this to the appropriate place. I can then scale this down to line it up more appropriately with what I want my flute to look like. So this is going to represent the top of my flute. You'll see that while the vertex of the top and bottom of the sphere line up pretty closely to the cylinder, we're a little bit offset here on the edges, and that's because of the natural curvature of this cylinder piece. And we'll deal with all of that as we progress. The next thing that we want to do is create a Boolean which will either add, combine, or subtract these 2 objects from each other. When you create a Boolean, your order of selection has an effect on what gets added or subtracted from what, and also the direction of the normals will have an effect. So in this case, I'll select the cylinder section first. I'll shift and select the sphere, and in my mesh Booleans, I'm going to select the difference. You can see that subtracts the sphere from the cylinder, and it also combines these into one object. So let's go back and talk a little bit about why I selected 8 sections for my sphere. Generally speaking, 8 sections is typically the minimum number of sections you're going to need in order to create a round object. Some people like to use a little bit more, 10 or 12 sections, but if you use less, these will not smooth to a circular object. So when I hit the 3 key, you can see that I'm going to get a certain degree of roundness here. Notice also that I have a distinct lack of symmetry around the edge here. And the reason that I have that lack of symmetry is because when I created this Boolean, the vertices didn't merge properly. So if I look at this vertex here and move it, you can see that it's actually 2 vertices, and that's what's causing that distortion. Over here, this one did merge properly, so there's no distortion on that edge. So I can easily fix that by selecting all of the vertices and then going to my Edit Mesh Merge tool. Now in the Merge tool, there is a threshold, and what this means is that any 2 vertices that are within 1/100th of a centimeter will merge. Anything beyond that will not merge. So you can adjust that based on the size of your model and what you want to have merge and not merge. So let's go ahead and merge that. And now if I hit the 3 key, you can see that I do have the symmetry, and this vertex is now one unified vertex. Another reason that I wanted to create my sphere with 8 sections is based on the approach that I'm taking. I want to ensure that I have quads. My polygon section has 4 faces, 1, 2, 3, 4. The number of vertices I have around the perimeter of my 2 cylinder sections matches the number of vertices that I have around the perimeter of my sphere. I can open up the modeling toolkit, take the multi-cut tool, and then split these polygons to the corners and enter each time. So that's going to give me all quads. The next thing that I want to do is harden this edge right here. I'm not worried about the perimeter here because that's going to get hardened when I duplicate and merge this column. But for here, this is a very, very soft edge, and in order to harden this, I'm going to use my Insert Edge Loop tool. And I'll open up the options. In the options, what I want to make sure of is that I'm using an equal distance from the edge. And as long as I have quads going around the perimeter, this should give me an edge loop going around this cylinder. Now, when I have an equal distance from the edge, each one of these distances is going to be the same. So I'll have some radial symmetry along there. If I had this set to relative distance from the edge, it's going to give me a distance that is a percentage of the original distance. So as I get further out towards the perimeter, I'm cutting each one of these by an equal percentage. So in this case, I want to use an equal distance from the edge. And the proximity of this edge loop is going to have an effect on how soft or hard this transition is. So I'll put one on the inside and one on the outside. I'll select this in object mode and I'll hit the 3 key. And we can see that I have a pretty nice transition. The next thing that I want to do is split these, and I want to make sure that the distance from the top and the bottom are where I want them to be aesthetically. So I don't really want to scale this. If I select this and scale it, that's going to change the shape of the entire thing. But if I want this circle to be closer to the top, I can just select these vertices and move them down. So now I'm going to select the lower faces and I'm going to delete them. So now I have the top part of one of my column sections. Finally, before I go any further, I want to take a look at these triangles here and make sure that they're quads. And the easiest way to deal with those is to select the edges. I got every other edge and I'm going to just delete them. So now those are quads. For the next step, before I go on, I'm going to select this object and I'm going to delete the construction history. In looking at the channel box here, you can see that every operation that I've completed here is retained in the construction history of this object. And at this point, the object is the way that I like it, so I don't really need all of this to be retained. And in fact, at this point, it's going to really get in my way. So I'll just go to Edit, Delete by Type History, and then this object is locked in the way that I want it to be. The next thing that I want to do is duplicate this object, but I want to get an inverse copy of it on the y-axis. So, for example, if I were to scale this in y and scale it all the way down to 0 and then go through 0 and then come back out the other side, I'm going to get a completely inverted copy of that. So in order to accomplish this quickly, I can go to my Edit, Duplicate Special, and in the option box, the first thing I'll do is reset all of the settings. Down here in this numeric section here, I can take my scale, and in the scale Y, I'll make that -1. So that's going to give me the inverse copy. And I just want one copy. So I'll go ahead and duplicate that, and that gives me a separate object. There are other ways that you can do this, but this works just fine. So at this point, I want to position these to the way that I want this column. What I need to do next is bridge these two together. I want to connect along this bottom edge and this top edge. So in order to do that, I need to combine these two pieces. So I'll go to Mesh, Combine, and then I want to select the leading edge. So the easiest way to do that is to select Edge here, and I'm going to draw a little box around this lower edge, which of course gives me edges that I don't want. So I'll hold the Control key down and subtract all of these additional edges from my selection. So this is going to give me just that bottom edge. I'll do the same thing for the lower one, only this time I need to hold the Shift key down to select this leading edge, and that will add to my selection, and then Control and deselect those. So now I just have those two close edges selected. I'll go to my Edit Mesh, Bridge, and in this case the number of divisions that I select is going to hold this shape. So I want to have at least one division. One division is going to give me a center line across here. And once I've got one division, I can change this by looking at my bridge options here. And I want to make sure that I have an odd number, because the odd number is always going to give me a line in the center as well. So I'm going to settle with 3 divisions. So that's the fluted column section. And if I hit the 3 key, you can see that I have that nice indented fluted column, and it's one piece. Again, I'm building up my construction history. I don't need that anymore, so I'll just hit Edit, delete by type history, and then I have my object locked into place. In order to use this piece then to create the full cylinder, I need to duplicate this around this center piece. Remember, that's where the pivot was for the original cylinder. The reason that it's not in the center anymore is because when I created the Boolean and the bridge, the software defaulted to put the pivot point in the middle of the object instead of the middle of the grid. So I'm going to hit the Insert key. I'll hold down the X key for grid snap, and I'm going to just snap the pivot point to the center of the grid. And then I'll hit the Insert key again so that I'm in object mode. I'll go to my Edit, Duplicate Special, and reset my settings. Now in this case, what I want is 9 copies. Remember, we had 20 sections of the cylinder to begin with, and we've been working with 2. So we want to multiply that 2-section piece by 10, but we already have 1, so we only need 9 additional ones. Since we are using 10 sections going around in a complete circle, we want to make sure that our rotation in Y is 36 degrees. So 36 degrees times 10 is 360 degrees, which is our full circle. So I'll go ahead and duplicate that. And you can see that that creates the column that we're looking for. Now each one of these is a separate piece. So if I hit the 3 key, each one maintains its own individual integrity. So what we want to do next then is to combine these. So we'll select them all, go to Mesh, Combine, and then we want to make sure that our vertices are all merged, because what we have here, for example, is 2 vertices in the same spot. Same thing with this. So we'll select all the vertices, and again we'll go to Edit Mesh, Merge, and the default setting should be OK. Everything is merged. Again, looking at the object here, you can see we have input here, the poly merge vertex and the poly unite. This is the combine, and that's the merge. And all of the history is listed right here. Each one of these is one of those separate sections as an input. So we want to get rid of those. So I'll just go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. All of those go away. All of this goes away, and I'm left with one single object.